Hello, Warhammer hobbyists. It's Hooves of Doom here. It's been a while, and this is a type of channel update, I guess. Um, the world is still in different states of upheaval, but my life is starting to get a little more normalized, and I'm hoping to kind of get things going again, both personally on a hobby level and also just some content back on my channel. Um, there are several things to kind of I want to discuss in this video. But this morning, of course, there was the Decadence and Decay preview that unveiled the new Slendesh mortals for Age of Sigmar, and absolutely stunning models. Loved every minute of that. That's a collection line that, as a kind of a hardcore collector like myself, that's a piece that was missing for a very long time. There are sporadic Slaanesh mortal units stretching back into Warhammer Fantasy, but they kind of fell by the wayside, and they were kind of severely outdated at this point, and kind of one-off things. Now it looks like we're going to get a fairly full army range here, and that's very exciting. So, a couple weeks back, under the whole new kind of COVID restrictions that are kind of continuing to ramp up, they did I think it was for Thanksgiving, where they did a video where they, encourage people to hobby together online and engage in hobby with one another at appropriate social distance. And in the course of this little video, they did a little animated video. This is Games Workshop. They put out this picture of as part of the video, a picture of a Doom Bull or a Gore Bull or some sort of Minotaur reading a book. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to snag that little image and use it as part of my profile pic. And I just like that little pic. And he's reading a little red book. And I happened to, at the exact time that was happening, reading a little Loeb Classical Library book. These are beautiful, small little books that have kind of a Latin and English text. And I just thought, you know what, he's even reading a book. He's even a Gore Bull that likes the classics. So I thought that was appropriate for my channel, and I might use that as my little logo going forward. But the biggest thing going on in my life, and really the last several months, besides COVID and everything else, was I moved. That might not come as a big surprise for some of you. I have a reputation for moving fairly frequently. This time, we're really hoping this is it. We're somewhat sick of moving. My wife has family in Maine, and it's a little closer to my family in Canada. And so we decided to move back to Maine. Some humming and hawing there. It wasn't really planned initially at all, kind of a spur-of-the-minute decision right in the middle of the summer. But that transition's behind us. Packing up, moving cross-country, it's a little bit of an ordeal, but it's done. We got to this house. This is a house we've actually lived in twice before. So that's kind of interesting. But it had been rented. It's been 8 years or so since we were last here. And in that time, someone else was renting it. And they kind of trashed the place a little bit. It wasn't kind of deliberately trashing the house, but just kind of hard living. Clearly weren't necessarily cleaning the place that often or taking care of it. And we hauled out 4 16-foot dumpsters worth of crap, just kind of get rid of them. So a lot of work there. We're kind of repainting. There's an enormous amount of work to be done around the property, but we're really hoping to buy it and make it something nice and settle here, hopefully for the long term. I'm looking for more of a permanent job right now, and I think I landed one. So things are looking good there. It's nice to be close to family. I can't visit my family in Canada, of course, but it's close enough that it feels like, and it's familiar. I know the places around here. So that's a big deal. Now, as somewhere where I've lived before, this room actually that I'm in now used to be a hobby room. And the master bedroom just down the hall used to be a hobby room for me as well. And so it brings back some memories being back in here. This is long before I created the channel. This time around, though, what we'll be doing is this room will be primarily the way I envision it. I'm basically having 2 hobby rooms at this point. Lord knows I need the space. This room will be mostly for painting and video production, maybe some videos anyway, and just kind of books, collectibles, board games, things like that. Models and gaming supplies are going to be in the basement. And so I have a little picture here of this room, and there's a huge stack of books that I need to find. I'd love to get some IKEA bookcases like I had in Colorado. We sold most of our furniture to kind of assist with the move and generate a little bit of cash. Now, of course, I can't get them. I'd have to cross state lines in order to do so, and that involves potentially going back into quarantine. And also they don't deliver out here, but they're the only bookcases I know from IKEA that can support the weight that I need. So I will eventually get some bookcases in here. This room will have some nice artwork on the walls and things like that, but right now it's just full of books and just kind of storage mess. But I hope to get my paint station up and running, and I've been putting together some models. All the model and gaming supplies are going to be in the basement. Now that's kind of an unfinished basement at this point. In the long term, I think we do want to put some effort into finishing it, maybe putting some walls up, laminate the flooring, paint the walls, maybe put some drywall down and things like that. But for the time being, I've tried my best to clean it up. There's a little bit of cobwebs and things like that to still fix here and there, but it's coming together fairly well. I'm actually really excited by it. I split it up into 2 different areas, one of which is Age of Sigmar and the other is 40K. Lots of room down there to potentially have 2 tables at least. And yeah, I'm pretty excited. I know a couple other YouTubers like Paul Conti aren't too far away from me. I could see myself going down to his place every couple months, or him coming up here every now and then. And that seems like a really nice place to play. Like I said, a little more cleaning, put down some traps for spiders, things like that. But I'm, honestly, in the past I've gone down there and it felt more like just a typical basement that you don't want to spend a ton of time in. But I've been down there quite a bit in the last week or 2, and it's starting to feel much more like a space to hang out in and have some fun. And it's a dry basement. Thankfully, I'm still a little nervous about some pipes breaking or something and my models get covered in water, but I don't think that will happen. We've been working on the plumbing here. It's greatly improved, and I hope it's just kind of a nice little spot. And thankfully, my little storage system of plastic bins really kind of helps to limit any potential water damage to models. But yeah, so I'm pretty excited with that. What I have been doing hobby-wise is just assembling a ton of models. Since August, I've been actively purchasing here. And I'm getting quite a sizable chunk of new things for Christmas as well. But what I've basically been working on the last 4 weeks is Lumineth, and Necrons, and Space Marines, and Death Guard, and Beastclaw Raiders, and Sisters of Battle, and Imperial Knights, and it's a really long list. There's a picture here of my painting table, and yeah, that's all being added to my collection just in the last few months. This I keep stats the last 4 years of the amount of models I purchase and the amount of models I paint. This year is by far uh, the largest accumulation of plastic in those past 4 years, and quite possibly the largest accumulation of plastic in the last 20 years that I've been in the hobby. I don't know why that's the case. For whatever reason, during COVID, we just happened to have more of a financial boom than most other people. Um, just working from home, stimulus checks that we didn't really need, things like that. So, for us, it's been a pretty good year, um, and I'm pretty excited. I'm really One of the things I've been working on here is prioritizing my collection, breaking it down into different components so that every army is basically based around different allegiance abilities. So, like, I've broken things down in my spreadsheets. This is my absolute uh, crazy mind of trying to comprehend the collection in its entirety. And it's kind of psychological at this point. I'll freely admit that there's not a lot of um, practicality here whatsoever. It's just kind of a degree of excess that is trying to manage itself in a more rational form. Probably none of that makes sense, but but basically I've broken down all the different armies. So, like, even Beasts of Chaos is divided into um, Beasts and Warherd and a Thunderscorn, all the different parts that you could potentially have a unique army from. And I've ordered all of those down from largest to smallest and trying to build up the smaller armies so that they're viable. I have models from basically everything in Warhammer, but they're not all usable armies, right? I might have 400 or 500 points of an army, and other armies are, has several thousand points, right? So trying to even out those a little bit, focus on the armies that need a little more help, and this is my way to focus my collecting activities in a way that, while inherently irrational, make a little more sense. Yeah, it's kind of bonkers. But the big thing here for me is to try to get back into a routine where I can start to transition back to painting, getting some progress, hopefully get some games in down that basement. The other big thing I've been working on continually now for years, and I've now talked about this for a few years, is my collecting resource. This is basically an online catalog of Games Workshop models. And I've been working on this since 2013. So about, a good 8 years now. A little more emphasis in the last couple of years, a little more actively working towards the goal. I still haven't even really tackled the concept of the website yet, but the piece here is that this will be a separate platform by which you can search for any conceivable GW model. Games Workshop is, intent on pushing new products as it, rightly, from a business standpoint, that makes the most sense. They're not going to advertise models that you can no longer buy. But I think there's a real need for that type of collecting resource. The thing that I've continually underestimated is how much work this actually involves. If you take a holistic approach of Games Workshop, it is, several thousand models just since 2000. Eventually, I'd like to incorporate all the models from the 80s and 90s, and that's a chunk. That's a huge work there. either data mining things like the Stuff of Legends, which is kind of the current collection resource for that era of models, or basically doing what they did and scanning and uploading images from GW catalogs, which I would have to obtain and embark on that work to do. In general, this is an enormous workload that continually increases every single week, right? Because every single week there are new models being produced and released. And I've spent a lot of work doing metadata for models. If you're unfamiliar with that term, basically it's information about information. Okay, it's kind of a library jargon for the most part. And metadata is the type of thing that, so you have an image of a model. It's not just enough for me to keep track of one name, because in many cases over many years, especially with the launch of Age of Sigmar, things have been renamed. And so you need to keep track of all the potential name changes. In some cases now, what used to be a generic kit can now kind of turn into a special character. And maybe at some point in the future, that special character does get its own dedicated model. All those are tracking different terminology, different name changes. I also want to keep track of the year the model was released. Potentially the sculptor, if I can figure that out. That's not really common knowledge at this point. But there are, I know some of the sculptors, will probably declare on Twitter that this is the model they worked on. I've been keeping notes of those. There's a lot of work. And the goal here, of course, is so that if you can search for a model, something like a gargant, right? A gargant essentially has 3 different terms now that you might want to search for. The new army that just came out, the Sons of Behemoth or whatever, gargant and giant, right? And so all of those models need to have 3 potential names associated with them. And how far back do you go with that? Do you go back into the old fantasy giants? Do you go back into Albion giants? All these are considerations that I'm trying to kind of parse through. And suffice it to say, when you're dealing with several thousand images, it's a lot of work. But ultimately, my hope is to eventually get this on some sort of website, something that's useful. That itself will be a hurdle. I'm also thinking of making this a separate platform, quite honestly. A separate YouTube channel mostly devoted towards collecting, and a separate website, even if I were to make a hoovesofdoom.com. I don't think I would include this. I thought about that for a while. The problem with this type of website is you run some sort of risk at running against GW's legal team. I have no intention of making money off this. I'm just promoting existing models. But generally speaking, and any copying of images from Games Workshop's website, if you read the terms of agreement, is specifically copyright infringement. Now, everyone is doing this. Any type of blog, YouTube, channel where they're talking about the new releases, they are all doing this to some extent. But there's a difference between copying a dozen images and copying several thousand images. And I don't think, that would happen, but it has enough of a unique characteristic, both in terms of the content I want to do with it, and also to kind of keep it in a kind of a separate legal fashion from what I'm doing on Hooves of Doom. There are other projects in my life I want to work on. I'm going to prioritize, I think, the models first. I think that has some potential to, I think, I don't intend on explicitly making money, having some sort of paywall. I think some community support is probably a viable option, something through Patreon. If it has some success, and I really do think it could, Um, you know, I won't know until it's live and it actually has some legs to stand on. I could see GW taking it over in the same way that they did with something like War Scroll Builder. They could have a platform that just promotes their products as kind of a business promotion of some sort. But also, I'm just kind of thinking off the cuff, like, you know, they do back orders, made to order stuff. If they had like a button or something, right, where you can indicate your interest in the same way that, you know, a product is out of stock on the GW website, you can click I'm interested and they email you when it comes back into stock. This could be something where, again, just thinking off the cuff, where after 1,000 notifications of people saying they're interested in this model, they do a selected run. Something like that. But in general, I think it just has, there's all sorts of forge-world models and everything else, all which I've data mined, collected, literally thousands of images from Forge World. And I really think it's viable to throw it all together and do one engine, because my God, it is really confusing to actually search through GW's website because they're so focused on pushing purchases. Naturally, I'm not blaming them for that, but it's just, there's potential, I think, room to have a separate platform that is just a um, celebration of all the models that they've ever produced. Now, that's just the model piece. I'm a kind of a universal collector here. I collect a lot of models from both 40K and fantasy, but that's not all I have. I have some Black Library models, I have some comics, I have other things. I'm going to focus on models first and foremost because I think that's what people like, that's what people are interested in. But I could see, you know, again, some sort of side platform, a different tab or something that looks at lists or images of Black Library novels or comics or other collectible items that have been in around in existence, because this is a massive hobby, and few companies produce this amount of product on a weekly basis. It is quite staggering to actually try to organize the entirety of it. And we'll see. Anyway, that's something I'm working on as well. I need to devote myself a little more attention to it, like almost treat it like a part-time job or something, because it's going to take that much effort to actually not only just stay ahead of current releases, but actually work into the backlog and then get it to a point where then I can think about, you know, creating the website and putting it forward, and think of all the, you know, tripwires there with breaking it down so that when you open a new web page, it doesn't take an hour to load every single image. Anyway, that's something I'm working on. And mostly here, just personally, Who's a Doom, painting, etymology videos is something I'm really interested in, the kind of the history of origin of words in Warhammer. I really want to kind of double down on that and some of the other kind of classical videos that I'll be working on, both for 40K and AOS. One other thing before I leave you, I did make a video earlier this year. I will plug it here. It's not Warhammer related. It is, however, map related. I put out a video last year on Horus Heresy maps. Some people really liked that map. And, you know, when you spend a lot of time making a video and you get a couple dozen views, it's a little disheartening. But this was on my, you know, more professional channel, so it is not on Hooves of Doom. I'll put the link to it down below. This is a video about the first map in the first atlas, the Theatrum Orbis Terrarum. It is a map about Stoicism, Roman Stoicism, and kind of the worldview of Abraham Ortelius, who is the map maker. But in any case, it's a little more esoteric. It's like a 45-minute video. If you have any interest in watching that, and me ramble on about kind of history and maps and Latin, by all means, go ahead and watch that. Anyway, what I'm hoping for is that this is the first of more videos, and that I'm within reason back into the swing of things, and that you'll see a little more of me. So thank you for staying subscribed to the channel. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you very much. I know it's kind of a long ramble here, but kind of a lot going on in my life, and I'm excited for the future. So thank you for watching, and have a good one.